understood pretty early on that in order to be successful, I had to work 10 times harder than everyone else because of my limitations. And if I could work 10 times harder than everyone else and do the things that no one else was willing to do, I could turn my disadvantages into my advantages.
Welcome to the Powerful One podcast with your host, Tommy Parker. This college dropout turned entrepreneur and high-performance coach created Powerful One with the mission of sharing the stories of individuals who have divided from conformity and redefined success in their own terms. Join us as we dive into the incredible stories and journeys of becoming truly powerful.
Welcome to the Powerful One podcast, everybody. Today's episode is with special guest Aaron Golub. But before we get into the episode, I just want to say, if you're new to the channel, welcome. If you have been here before and you like the content, all I ever ask for you guys is that you write us a review, write us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, and or subscribe to us if you're listening or watching on YouTube. That is all I ever ask of you guys. That is greatly appreciated. That is what really helps to move the needle in the podcasting space. So thank you guys for doing that. And now, without further ado, I'm welcoming Aaron Golub to the podcast. Aaron is a financial advisor, keynote speaker, and ex-NFL free agent, and he became the first legally blind athlete to play a football game in Division I at Tulane University. He was a captain at Tulane his senior year and went on to pursue his dream of being in the NFL, where he was a free agent before retiring to achieve success in so many other areas. Aaron never let his limited vision get in the way of his successes, and his goal is to show people that it doesn't matter what they are fighting or what their perceived limitations are, and that anything is achievable with hard work and tuning out the judgment of others. His planning, passion, and perseverance enables him to be successful. Aaron has paved the way for many others with disabilities and shown them that the impossible is truly possible. He shines light on this vision with his podcast Blind Ambition, where he talks with a number of different people who have overcame so much adversity and been able to make their limitation a superpower. And in this episode, we talk a lot about Aaron's football journey. He talks about confidence, consistency, shifting your identity, having vision but not being consumed by the end result. He talks about having clear goals and delegating tasks. Aaron also talks a lot about time blocking and setting boundaries with your time. He talks about the power of communication and relationships, and also his future plans and successes for what he has going on right now. So here it is, guys, episode 47 with Aaron Golub. All right, guys, Powerful One podcast. We are here with Aaron Golub, the powerful Aaron Golub. How are you, brother?
Hey, man, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing well and looking forward to being here today.
I'm super excited, man. You made the time. As we just mentioned in the intro, you obviously have so many accolades and you're doing so much powerful stuff, including your podcast, your speaking engagements, everything you're doing. So I want to get into that a little bit. But first, man, I want you to kind of, if it's cool with you, just talk about, what does it mean to be legally blind? Like, what does that mean? I think people hear that and maybe don't know exactly what that entails, right? So can you give just a little bit of background about what that looks like for you?
Yeah, so everyone's a little different. Mine is I have no vision in my right eye and extremely limited in my left. And so I was born with this. In my left eye, I have a hole that's probably like the size of half of a dime. And through that hole, what someone who has 20/20 vision sees it about 200 feet away, I see it about 20 feet away. My vision's about 2,200. So that's my vision. I grew up with it from birth and really haven't experienced anything different.
I'm so fascinated. I mean, obviously, like we just said in the intro, like first legally blind Division I college football player. I mean, just an incredible thing, like you said, to be able to overcome that, and not only overcome that, but thrive given your situation, man. So I'd love to backtrack a little bit to, high school, or at least when you first started playing football, and what that kind of path looked like for you, just how you were able to consistently be able to overcome being legally blind and wanting to be this, this football player, man. I'm so fascinated behind that story.
Yeah, man. I mean, I played a lot of different sports growing up, whether it's been like, I did sports on my own. Like I've always like skied or snowboarded, but like tried to do a lot of team sports. I tried baseball, basketball, soccer, things like that as a little kid, and nothing really worked out. Nothing was a good fit for me. And, although some would say, why football? How is that a good fit? I wasn't a wide receiver. I wasn't a quarterback. I wasn't, catching the ball on every play. And because of that, I could find an area that fit me well. And so going in 7th grade, when I really made the decision that I wanted to be a part of a team sport, I wanted to do something greater than myself, I decided that I would play football, and I had to find the right place for me. And so at that time, I was an offense and defensive lineman, specifically a center and defensive nose tackle. And, my goal was block the person in front of me or just run straight. I was learning how to play the game. There wasn't much to it at that age. And a few years later, I switched to long snapping, and we can dive into that in a bit. But, it was really just the desire of wanting to be a part of a team, wanting to be a part of something greater than myself, and then finding how I could play.
Absolutely, man. So I'm curious about like the people around you, whether it was friends, family, parents, peers, teachers, these people around you as you're growing up and wanting to have these, sports aspirations. How was that dynamic in terms of the people in your life, either supporting you or maybe not supporting you, and kind of the effect that that had early on just in your sports career and then obviously, further on?
Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously my parents and coaches were a little nervous and scared at first, but it was something that I wanted to do, something that I needed to do. And so they were willing to work with me and help me in any way that I could, any way that they could, to allow me to succeed. And, although they were nervous, they were willing to let me do it. And I think everyone was pretty much supportive. It wasn't until, high school when I really set my sights on like, I want to play college football. I want to find a way to play. And, people thought I was ridiculous then. And everyone thought that was going to be impossible. But I think just generally playing football, people were supportive of let's find a way for him to play.
Yeah, dude, I'm really curious on what you said right there. When you kind of had that aspiration of like, I want to play college football, what that looked like, what that next kind of step for you looked like. I've heard you talk about in previous podcasts that, the journey wasn't very, you weren't always that good of a player, right? You had to really work to develop your skills, especially in long snapping. So just talk about that, man, being a long snapper and then that progression from when you realized you wanted to play college football to what that took to be able to get there.
Yeah, man. And so just to clarify, like I wasn't just set on college football. I was set on I want to play Division I football. Like I wasn't interested in looking at Division II or Division III schools. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like that's a really good fit for a lot of people. But for me, it was like, if I'm going to go at this, I'm going to go at this 100%. And I want to play at the highest level possible. That was what I wanted. And so sophomore year of high school, I was a 3rd string junior varsity center and defensive tackle. Like the difference between a 3rd string junior varsity defensive tackle and center to Division I athlete is absolutely ridiculous. And so, at that point I said, how can I make it there? Because I'm a really shitty football player at this point. I'm not good at what I'm doing. And so I had to find a way to become good. And I found long snapping. And I said to myself, if I get good enough at this, then I can have an opportunity. I can have a chance. And from then on out, it was just, I woke up at 5 a.m. every day. I started practicing long snapping before school. I went to school. I went to practice. I lifted weights every single day after practice. And I did the same stuff on the weekends. I practiced long snapping. I would lift weights. I would do whatever it took to achieve success. I wanted to work so hard that no one else had a shot. No one else had an opportunity. I understood pretty early on that in order to be successful, I had to work 10 times harder than everyone else because of my limitations. And if I could work 10 times harder than everyone else and do the things that no one else was willing to do, I could turn my disadvantages into my advantages.
That's incredibly powerful, man. Did you always have that level of kind of discipline and commitment towards stuff, or was football that first thing, man, where you just went all in? And I'm curious where that discipline and that commitment toward, putting your all into something came from.
I think football was the first thing that led to that. I mean, nowadays I'm very disciplined and committed to everything I do, but football was the first thing. And I think it comes from within. So many people talk about motivation, and, I'm a keynote speaker. That's one of the things that I do. And I talk all the time to companies, teams, events all over. And I always say, like, look, this speech can spark your motivation and help you. But most people are going to hear a speech, whether it be from me or someone who's, one of the best in the world, like a Tony Robbins or an Ed Milet or Les Brown. It's not going to change anything if you don't have that internal motivation. You're going to make a difference for a few weeks or a month, but it's not going to ultimately make a change unless you have that internal drive and motivation. And I think that the people who rely on external motivation see success in the short term. I can rely, if I went to the gym today and I said, I'm going to squat as much weight as I can, I'm going to focus on external motivation because it's going to get me mad. It's going to get me ready. It's going to get me motivated. But if I say like, I want to be one of the top keynote speakers in the world in 5 years from now, okay, how do I get there? I need to have that internal motivation to be willing to do the daily tasks, the daily things that move the needle forward every day that I don't want to do. And the people that eventually actually see success are the ones who have that internal motivation.
That's so good, man. I want to jam on that a little bit more, but it kind of goes along to the one thing that I kind of, stand by. It's like the emotion or the motivation can kind of get you there or help you out, but it's not, it's really the devotion and the commitment and that intrinsic motivation that can, or intrinsic, discipline and inspiration that can really take you there. So for you, what were some things you had to build upon to be able to ignore motivation and be able to establish some structures, some systems, to be able to build discipline to ultimately where I want to get to is, being a football player, Division I football player at Tulane, man, like obviously that discipline, it had to be harnessed in certain ways. And so it's not like you played at like you said, you had these D1 aspirations and, Tulane's a big time school. So what did some of those structures look like in place to be able to get you to that level?
It was about getting up every single morning, going to school, practicing long snapping on a daily basis. It wasn't something that I could do once a week and become good at it. I had to do it every day. I had to have other people around that, supported me and pushed me. I had to make sure that I lifted weights every day. I had to make sure I ate more because I was undersized and underweight. I had to do everything that no one else was willing to do. No one else was there at 5 a.m. No one else was lifting weights after practice. It was the small things that I did that added up. I was never the most athletic kid. I was never at first I was never the fastest or the strongest kid. By honestly, I became one of the strongest kids through lifting every single day, but that's not the point. The point is I was never the strongest, never the fastest, never the most athletic. But what I was is the most consistent and the most disciplined. And because I was the most consistent, I was able to see success. And it's the same thing in the business world. I or you or anyone who's extremely consistent every single day is going to fly by everyone else. The reason why I saw success in football and I will see success in speaking and everything I'm doing is because I'm more consistent than others, not because I'm better than them.
That's incredible, man. And a consistent theme that I'm hearing from you is just the self-confidence that you have. I'm sure a lot of that just comes from everything you've been able to overcome and everything you've really wanted to achieve that you have. And so talk about, man, achieving that dream of, playing Division I football. And then beyond that, man, where were your aspirations? Obviously an ex-NFL free agent. So like what did post-college look like for you, man?
So first, I just want to touch on the confidence thing real quick. So I was never always, the most confident person. I think that I learned to be confident through football. When I was younger, I was definitely not the most confident person at all. I think it had a lot to do with my vision. And when I was able to become good at football, it just generated this immense amount of confidence within me. And I learned from a coach that you want to be as confident as possible, but you need to learn to toe the line between confidence and cocky and never cross that line because you don't want to be a cocky person, but you want to be an extremely confident person. And I think I've done a very good job in my past and still today of learning how to toe that line. I'll never cross it, but I'm right there if I have as much confidence as possible. And then, going back to your previous question of what was it like kind of achieving that goal and then going on to be an NFL free agent, it was incredible. My sophomore year, I played for the first time at Tulane. I became the first legally blind Division I athlete to play in a game that day. And 2 months later, my coaching staff got fired because we went 3-9 the past 2 years. And I was essentially starting all over because I didn't know if the new staff was going to be willing to give me a shot or opportunity. And when they came in, I sat down with the head coach and we had a discussion. He was very unsure, so was I. And at the end of the day, we just said, let's try spring ball. If we have to have this discussion again, then I'll come in and we'll have it in May. Never had that conversation again. 2 years later, during my senior year, I was named one of our team captains. I decided at the end of the year I didn't want to quit, and I pursued being an NFL free agent.
Dude, that's incredible. One thing, I have a lot of friends who are, have either been at a high level in terms of athletic achievement or who are currently at a high level, including one of my best friends. And one thing I noticed, man, that it's so important, and we see this a lot, athletes with mental illness, because for so long their identity is athlete, right? And so eventually when that gets cut off, and if that's all they know, they can go in a really downward spiral. So, when football ended for you, man, what was that thing? Did you still have aspirations for other areas? Were you one track minded on football at the time? And I'm really curious how you kind of pivoted the identity of, being this football player for so many years and kind of that next avenue of life.
Yeah. So, I decided that it wasn't the right opportunity. It wasn't the right place for me. And I wanted to go into the world of finance, which we're not going to touch too much on just because of compliance reasons. But I had some offers in the world of finance and accepted a job. And, I hated where I was at. I moved to a city where I knew basically no one. I was at a firm that I didn't like what I was doing. And that first year out was not very fun for me, to be honest with you. Um, Very soon after, I decided to leave, go to a different financial firm in a different role, and to move back to Boston, where I'm from. And that was summer of 2019. And at the same time, I kind of decided I want to start doing speaking as well. And so I think that's really when a big shift happened in the sense of like I started loving everything I'm doing in finance. I started loving everything I'm doing in speaking because I had all this experience of speaking throughout the years of interviews and events and things with football that I could really bring to help others now. And, it just carried on to like, I love everything I'm doing and I'm doing the same stuff today in both areas. And I have these extremely high goals now in finance, in speaking, in my podcast. I'm in the process of writing a book. Like all of these areas that I have such high goals and expectations for myself, but you can't focus on those. You have to focus on what you can do today to get closer. And I think when people focus on the end result too much, they get overwhelmed, they get stressed. I mean, last week on Friday, a lot of good things came into my life that over the past few weeks of just the process is really taking hold and I'm on my way. But I was very overwhelmed of just I had so much to do. I have so much in progress in motion. And I just had to take a few minutes, take a deep breath and relax and say, you know what, this is fine. I have this under control. And what I can't control, I don't need to worry about. And I think that people need to understand that and really focus on that and focus on today instead of 5 years from now.
Yeah, that's so good, man. I love that. There's just that kind of that notion of living in the present and kind of getting that 1%, moving the needle a little bit every day. And so now in terms of where you're at now, man, I'm so curious. It's so cool to see, I'm sure your confidence progression and your ability to be able to speak and really be a leader, going and being a team captain, right, for college and doing these interviews and stuff to now you're speaking, so often partially for a living, whether it's, with the Blind Ambition podcast, whether it's being a keynote speaker. So talk about how important it is for you to be able to get your story told and to be able to also have people with similar stories kind of share their truth and just be a voice in the space.
Yeah, man, it's been a lot of fun, a lot more work than I thought it was really going to be, honestly, but it's been great. I think when I went into the space, I said, I've had so much experience. I was, my senior year of high school, I was on Good Morning America. I've had all these interviews. Like anyone's going to book me in a second. That's not what it takes. No one's just going to reach out to you and just book you to speak. You have to do a lot of work on your own. You have to reach out to a lot of people, especially in the beginning, because no one knows that, hey, I'm starting to actually speak and try and get hired for speaking events and things like that. And so it's been a lot of fun really mastering my craft and building out that network. And I have a long way to go and there's a lot of good things coming this year, but it's a process and it's hard and it's it really is hard. It's a lot harder than most people think, but I love it and I'm looking forward to the future.
Yeah, man, I'm super curious because I've heard you say a few times relating to the future and having, how important it is to have a vision, but also how important it is to like be present and really, take every day at a time. What advice do you have for people and what advice have you really, or what have you really done in your life to be able to balance those where you have this vision of this direction, you want to go, but not get overwhelmed and overtaken by that and just really be able to stay in the present? Is there any strategies or tactics or habits that you've built to help you with that?
First off, be really clear on what your actual goals are. Don't just say, I want to be the best at this, but have, legitimate things that you want to achieve. And so, one of my goals is in 5 years from now, I want to speak in a stadium in front of 50,000 people. I want to have, my podcast having, at least 100,000 downloads an episode. I want my book that I come out with to be a New York Times bestselling book. Things like that. You need to have very specific goals. And, they can be extremely high goals and hard goals to achieve, like those that I just said were, but you need to have very specific goals. But then understand that, from right now, I'm not going to go speak at a stadium of 50,000 people tomorrow. I'm not going to have a best-selling New York Times book tomorrow. I'm not going to have 100,000 downloads on the episode from a podcast that I release tomorrow. But what is going to happen is I can take small steps today and tomorrow and the day after and the day after that to get me to that goal. And so the only way to get a little bit closer to these end goals are to focus on now, focus on the present, but always have that vision and ideal of what you want in the future in your mind to motivate you.
Wow, I love it, man. Dude, that's so good. So you have a lot going on, Aaron. You've got, your podcast, you've got keynote speaking, you've got, you're a financial advisor, you're writing a book. How do you go about prioritizing these goals and prioritizing these different areas in your life, and really making sure that you're moving the needle in all the directions you want to without getting overwhelmed and kind of sucked into too much of one thing?
Yeah, I mean, first off, build a team around you who can do things that, either you're not good at or you don't want to do. For my podcast episodes, I'm very fortunate that I have someone who works for me. His name's Mike. He's phenomenal at what he does. And, I record the episodes, I send it to him, and he deals with everything else. I don't know how he edits it. I don't know what he does. He deals with it. It would take way too much of my time. And even if I knew how to do it, I don't want to do it. So I pay him to do it. You need to get things off your plate that you don't know how to do or you don't want to do. And I understand not everyone can do that. If you don't have the money saved up, if you're not making enough money, then you're going to have to do a lot of things on your own at first. But if you can get some of the stuff at any point that you just really don't know how to do or don't want to do off your plate like that, that would be way too much time consuming for me. And so I'm able to pay him to do it. So I'm going to pay him to do it. It's worth it in the end. And, I think also just really time block your time, really be efficient on what you're doing. I have generally set hours of I won't go on podcasts or record my podcast during certain times of the day. Between the hours of 9 and 4, I'll take calls and stuff, but I will not go on someone else's podcast. Generally, occasionally something happens and I have to, and I will definitely not record my podcast between the hours of 9 and 4 because I'm more focused on stuff for finance. You have to set boundaries, times, and things that, you're going to stick to.
That's really good advice, man. Speaking of really good advice, dude, you've overcame a lot in your life, and I know a lot of your passion and purpose now is about helping people be able to overcome something that they might look at as a limitation. So what advice could you give to somebody who, part of what I always say is, your excuses are valid and they are, they're absolutely true, but so what, or now what, right? So it's what advice would you give to people to help them be able to break out of either maybe it's a victim mentality or break out of a circumstance that they feel like is really impenetrable in terms of being able to succeed? What advice could you give to those people right now to kind of help them be able to really overcome the way you have?
Stop caring about other people's opinions. I think way too many people care way too much about others' opinions, and they're afraid because they think that others are truly judging them. And in fact, no one's judging you. If you're in the gym and someone looks over at you, they might look at you for 2 seconds and judge you for 2 seconds, and then they go back to their workout and they don't think about you again. But that's not what you and I think. If I'm in the gym and I see someone look at me, it might just bother me for hours because you think that they're thinking of you. That's just not true. Everyone has their own lives, their own issues, their own problems. No one's thinking about you all day, but way too many people think that others are. And as soon as you can understand that, no one really cares. No one is truly thinking about you all the time. No one's judging you all the time. You need to understand that. Then you can break free of it and focus on what matters and focus on people's opinions that you truly care about.
That's beautiful, man. That's fantastic advice. So Aaron, I'm curious, man, about your podcast, man. Talk a little bit about Blind Ambition. What made you want to start that podcast, and really, how the progression for the podcasting space has been for you in general, man, and your goals for podcasting.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a lot of fun. I started it because I was going on a lot of other people's podcasts, and with the pandemic of COVID, there weren't really live events. And so just another way for me to bring other people's stories. It's generally focused on people's stories who have overcome a great deal in certain areas of their life. Sometimes it's focused on if I just really want to get to know someone for networking purposes, then I pick them for that. I'll give an example of recently I had on AJ Vaynerchuk, and he has some obstacles in his life that a lot of people don't know about, and we talked about those. But regardless of that, one of the reasons I wanted to have him on was to build that relationship, to get to know him and provide value to him. And, if I had messaged him and just said, hey, can you hop on a call with me? He wasn't going to say yes. That wasn't going to happen. But if I said, hey, do you want to come on my podcast, share your story with my audience and get more, of an audience for yourself, there's a much higher chance of him saying yes. So most of the time it's focused on people who have, stories of overcoming obstacles. And then, occasionally I have to really dig deep to find that story, because if I want someone on it, because I want to build that relationship with them, then I'm going to make something happen.
That's so good, man. I love that. Aaron, what excites you most, man, about where you're at right now and where you're headed? You got a lot of stuff going well for you, man. Maybe it's a little bit of everything, but what really is getting you passionate and gets you energized to wake up every day and gets you excited for where you're headed for your future?
Just understanding that the process will allow me to succeed down the road. A little while ago, I actually just got off a call with Anthony Trucks. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's built a big name for himself in the speaking world and the coaching world and everything that he has going on. And I had this discussion with him, and I said to him, look, I really admire you. And you know that I've told you this before. I see him being, the next top speaker in the world. I really see him being like the next Ed Milet, the next, Lewis Howes, the next Les Brown. And I see myself being the next Anthony Trucks, and I'm going to continue to follow in his footsteps. And so, I think if he continues on his path, he's going to be, one of the top people there is. And if I continue on my path, I see myself literally following his footsteps. And I think that's the type of relationship that I love to have, because I think we have very similar stories, very different, but similar stories. And seeing what he's been able to do, I'm really trying to just copy his process and his patterns and do exactly what he's done.
That's awesome, man. I've been hearing you in the past couple questions talk a lot about the relationships and the connections that you've made. Like, how important has that been just over the course of your life, the people around you, the connections, the alignments, the support system to your success?
And it's everything. Becoming a good speaker, becoming good in business, or becoming good in anything you do isn't necessarily about how good you are, but it's about the relationships and the connections that you have. And I think most people don't understand that. In the business world, I'm more likely to work with someone that I truly like and trust than maybe their competitor who's 10% better than them. It just is what it is. If I really like you and trust you and have an outstanding relationship with you, the chances of you winning my business are a million times higher than, Joe Schmo, who might be a little bit better than you, but I don't know at all. It's the trust factor.
Dude, Aaron, man, I want people to be able to dive into your content, to, dive into everything that you have going on, man. So before I ask my last question, dude, where can people find you? Where can they connect with you? Where can they really engage with you?
Yeah. So AaronGolub.com, find all my stuff there. You can find my podcast, Blind Ambition, on, Apple, YouTube, Spotify, really everywhere. And then Instagram is at Aaron J. Golub. Same with Twitter, but my main, for speaking is Instagram. Also on LinkedIn, Facebook, really anywhere, just Aaron Golub.
Fantastic, man. So the last thing I like to ask people, man, is what is the best piece? You've had a crazy journey and overcame so much. What is the one core piece of advice, life advice, that you could give to somebody listening right now to kind of just tie a bow on this amazing podcast so far? What would that be?
Be the hardest working person in the room, be the most creative person in the room, and don't listen to anyone's opinion that you're not willing to take advice from. Don't take criticism from people who you're not willing to take advice from.
That's so good, man. Well, guys, go check out Aaron. Go check out everything he's got going on. This guy is doing tremendous things. He's got a lot of vision for where he knows he's going to go in life. So stay locked in. I'll make sure to link all of his stuff in the show notes. But, dude, thank you for being on the Powerful One podcast and sharing your power with the listeners.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Awesome, guys. We are out.
Thank you guys so much for making it to the end. I really appreciate your support, not only for me, not only for Powerful One, but also all the guests on this platform, and just tuning in and being inspired and being powerful, man. So, thank you again if you watched this, and, excited for the future. Excited. It's been a great year for Powerful One. Excited for everything I have coming in the future, everything with the brand, everything with my personal brand, and just everything in general. So just want to thank you guys again, and be sure to, share this if it inspired you, if it felt powerful, if you connected with it, share it with your friends, share the platform. Please go, if you don't mind, go subscribe on YouTube, go write a review on iTunes. All that stuff really means a lot. Thank you guys again, and be sure to stay tuned, because every week we are coming out with a new podcast episode. Stay locked into the page, guys. Thank you. Stay powerful.